if folks wouldn't mind either taking the mic or jumping into the chat and just sharing a little bit about their project or project idea, just so I have a sense of who's in the room and perhaps can use sort of better examples. Would anyone mind starting?
Yeah, that's a great idea. I know some people were sharing their ideas earlier on in the other workshops, so feel free to jump in and give a brief overview in chat or unmute yourself.
And always feel free to pass if it doesn't feel comfortable. I'm sure you've been doing this over and over again over the last few hours. Any takers? Okay, we'll warm you up. Not a problem at all. So we're going to be talking about strategic planning, the very, very basics of strategic planning. So a little bit, thank you, Lima, a little bit about defining our why. So what is it that we're actually doing and what is our overall impact? Where is it that we actually want to go with our organization or with our project if we're trying to scale or make it more sustainable? A little bit of mission and vision statement creation. So how do we communicate what we're doing and why it matters to the people that it matters to, either to our beneficiaries, to our program staff internally, or even funders and donors. A little bit about actual strategic planning, so thinking about where we are now, what we're doing now, but also where we want to go. And even more so in that action planning piece, how is it that we're going to get there? And then I'm going to leave like 10 to 15 minutes, hopefully at the end, depending on where we end up, for a little bit of Q&A, just in case there's anything that I didn't cover that you have questions about. And thank you to folks who are jumping into the chat. That's super helpful. Girls Leadership and a magazine. Very cool. Awesome. So I first want for everyone to think about, and this is going to be semi-interactive, but if everyone's tired, we can also keep it one way, no worries at all. An important part about thinking in terms of how we might scale our projects or start our organizations or solidify our organizations is really defining our why. So why is it that we're doing what we're doing, and what is our hope for impact? What is it that we want to accomplish? So thinking about what is your project or organization? What is it that you do? Who do you serve, and why is it that you're doing this work? So what is your project or organizations are the things that you're actually doing? So providing an online magazine or creating or providing a positive space for newcomer girls to express themselves. That's what you're doing. Who you serve. In this case, we're talking about Afghan Canadians or newcomer girls. And why is it that you're doing this work? And that why is really, really important, because that's what tells us the actual impact. And as we communicate, I think we often talk about communicating to funders because that's usually how we sustain ourselves most often. But I think that it's important to have this language for our internal communication as well. So even if you have program volunteers, understanding what role that volunteer plays in your overall vision of the work that you're doing is so important. So that why, and people feeling connected to that why, yourself and others, is going to be the biggest pull in terms of thinking about your future organization and or project. So being able to answer these questions is really, really important. And being able to answer these questions will help you create a vision and mission. So a vision is a shared belief about the future you can create if you achieve all of your goals. And your mission statement is a brief description of your fundamental purpose. So exactly what I said before, which is why do you exist? Our vision is sort of this overarching umbrella that allows us to sort of possibility think and to imagine what the future would look like if the work that we're doing has the the impact that we imagine that it could have. And the mission statement is really like, what is it that we're doing to contribute to that overall vision? So what is the piece of the work that we are doing that will contribute to this shared belief? And also, I want to say, if anyone has questions, comments, suggestions, concerns as we're going through, I don't mind if you interrupt. So feel free to hop on the mic, put up a hand, or hop in the chat literally at any time. And so not all organizations will have a mission and vision, but what it does do is it creates that sort of shared belief, like I mentioned, and it ensures that everyone's sort of on the same page. So as we're starting to engage in some of this work, that we all know what we're working towards. So I have a few examples of some vision and mission statements from organizations sort of across Canada, primarily in Toronto, actually. So taking RT Global, which maybe you've mostly heard of before, their vision statement is youth around the world are actively engaged and connected in shaping a more inclusive, peaceful, and sustainable world. So as you're thinking about that first section with defining our why, who is it that you're trying to serve? What is it that you're doing? And why are you doing it? What's that impact? Your vision and mission statement should have those things embedded into it. So when we're looking at taking it global as an example, we're talking about youth. So that's the who. The why is so that they're included in shaping a more inclusive, peaceful, and sustainable world. And what they're doing is actively engaging and connecting to be able to do that. Canadian Roots Exchange is another organization, and their vision is to believe in a Canada where youth stand in solidarity to promote respect, understanding, and reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. And then C, the Center for Young Black Professionals, seeks to create a society and an economy in which Black youth achieve financial prosperity and high quality of life for themselves and their families. They do this by working in collaboration with Black youth, their families, employers, and the broader community. So really, as we're looking at these and each of the organizations, it's about what is the future that they're hoping to create. These are like more long-term things. So it's not necessarily what you're doing right now or the impact that you're having right now, but it contributes to this broader vision that will hopefully create a more just future, successful future for the folks that you're trying to serve. Your mission statement. So for taking it global, we talked a bit about what it is that they're trying to do in the long term, what that vision is. The way that they're doing that is by empowering youth to understand and act on local and global challenges. So going back to that, vision statement, youth around the world are actively engaged and connected in shaping a more inclusive, peaceful, and sustainable world. And they do this by empowering youth to understand and act on local and global challenges. For CRE, or Canadian Roots Exchange, they are trying to build bridges between Indigenous and non-Indigenous youth in Canada by facilitating dialogue and strengthening relationships through leadership programs. So again, going back to that vision, we believe in a Canada, so an overall Canada, where youth stand in solidarity to promote respect, understanding, and reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. So the actual bridge building is how Canadian Roots Exchange is doing that. And for C, we focus on providing youth with exposure, experience, navigation, and holistic support. So again, what they're actually doing to reach that vision. And we have a question.
Yes, I have a question, and I feel like other people may be curious about it as well. But I know some of us kind of mix the two usually. Like we think the mission and vision is the exact same. So what would you say is the distinguishing factor just so we know.
Yeah. So it's about that that long-term visioning versus what we're doing right now. So for, again, going back to taking it global empowers youth right now. That's the work that they're doing currently. That's their mission, that's their mandate. Whereas what they're actually trying to accomplish in the long term is having youth actively engaged and connected in shaping a more inclusive and peaceful and sustainable world. So that's not necessarily the impact that they're having right now, but the work that they're doing in empowering youth seeks to achieve that vision.
Perfect. So it's what we're working towards.
Exactly.
Perfect.
The vision
Amazing.
is, yeah, and it can be very confusing. And I will say that some organizations, some projects put those two things together. But the vision is important because it keeps everyone sort of on the same page. And I was having a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and someone shared that it also helps build partnerships. So when you're thinking about that overall vision, and like I said at the beginning, your mission is a piece of how you're contributing to that vision. And so other organizations, other projects might have a very similar vision, but they're doing the work a little bit differently. So they might have this idea of having youth around the world actively engaged and connected in shaping a more inclusive and sustainable world, but perhaps they're working with parents to be able to do that. And so their mission looks a little bit different than taking it global, despite the fact that their overall vision looks the same. And so having a vision can help you sort of have that overarching umbrella that allows you to sort of think outside of your own mission and mandate.
Wonderful. Thank you for summarizing that. That makes a lot of sense. And it's easy to remember now.
Yeah, I hope so.
Perfect.
And as you're going through it, and I'm going to actually give folks a chance, if you don't already have a mission or a vision, to sort of start thinking about that. So I'll give you a few minutes. If you do already have a mission and or a vision, maybe you only have one or the other, I think it's still important to continue to go through this process every so often so that you can ensure that your mission and vision still align with the work that you're doing. You'll find as you start to scale or you start to grow, your organization or your project might take different directions. And so having these conversations with yourself, with your team, can make sure that you're still aligned. Perhaps that mission has changed as you've grown, as you've gotten more funding, as your team has gotten a little bit bigger and you have more capacity for different activities. Perhaps that mission is changing, or perhaps that vision is changing. What we also find, or at least what I've also found, is that because of the way that funding works, especially for nonprofits and charities, that sometimes organizations will take on funding or start a project that doesn't necessarily directly align with their mission and vision, but because of the way that funding works, they'll start doing it. And so you'll find yourself drifting a little bit further away from that mission and vision just because of the reality of how funding works. So going through this exercise of really solidifying what it is that you're doing and what that vision is, what you're hoping to accomplish, can help keep you on track in the longer term. And I'm going to get into a little bit about why that's important in terms of our strategic planning as well. But perhaps I can give you a little bit of time to do this for yourself. If you already have a mission and vision, I would love to hear what you've put together. But in terms of our mission and vision, I think a few things that are really important is to not worry about the wording, especially for right now. This is a 45-minute to an hour session, so you're not going to be able to wordsmith and find the exact right words. But just get some stuff down on paper or in your thoughts so that you can work with it later on. So don't perfect it. Don't worry about the wording. Just what is it that you're trying to accomplish? What is your vision? And what is it that you're doing to get there? Keep it short and simple. in terms of communicating our mission and vision, the most sort of poignant, impactful missions and visions are usually short and simple. They get the message across, they're very clear, so that me, as someone that doesn't know about the work that you're doing, if I go onto your website and I'm like, what are these folks doing? That it's very, very clear and easy and concise for me to understand. Be specific. So like I mentioned before, in your mission and vision, who is it that you're trying to impact? So I would stray away from, maybe even all Canadians or the entire world, because I mean, unless you're working with the entire world, which may be possible, but if you're not, making sure that that's very clear and solidified in that specificity so that you know if you've reached your goals. If we're not specific, it can be very difficult to be like, oh yeah, we accomplished what we said we're going to do, because it's also general. And so we sort of just like move through and wane back and forth. So be specific as possible. And then my last piece of advice is to be honest. So be honest about where you're at, what kind of work that you're doing. I think that as we engage, especially in the kinds of work that it seems like you all are doing, that we want to be able to do it all. We want to be able to help all of a certain community or offer a specific sort of service or a variety of services that address specific needs, but we can't do it all. And that's the point of building partnerships and learning about what different organizations or projects are doing, because we don't have the capacity to do it all. So be very honest with yourself around where you're at and what you actually have the capacity to do, so that way you know that you're actually going to reach and achieve that goal. So what I would love to do is maybe give like 5 minutes. I can even put on some tunes or something for you to sit and think about what that mission and vision would be. If you already have a mission and vision, what I would love for you to do is think about the last couple of projects that you've worked on and see how they relate to your mission and vision. See which part of that project is directly aligned with that mission and vision, and maybe you'll notice that, yes, absolutely, we're right on track, but maybe you'll see some variation there, and that can be very interesting as well. So we're at like 3:10, so let's say 3:15, I can check back in and see how folks are doing, and then we'll go from there, if that's okay with everyone.
Wonderful. That sounds great.
So these are the 3 big pieces. What is it that you're doing? Who do you serve? And why do you do this work? Maybe like 30 more seconds. Okay, would anybody be willing and able to share what they came up with, or if you already have a mission and vision, share that as an example? Again, no pressure.
Definitely love to hear. I feel like, so everyone already applied and kind of gave their project objective. So even that, oh, I see Omid.
Oh, hi there. Yes. Just wanted to share one of my project ideas and who I'm serving.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's just so my idea is that to launch a website called like Hire an Afghan, where the mission is to help with Afghans to, it doesn't necessarily like people from newly coming Afghans who need jobs or looking for work, and basically this site will help them establish connections, maybe find jobs or even gain mentorships for the kind of field that they'll be interested in. And the reason I'm doing this is just because I understand getting your foot in the door can be a hard process, especially for a new refugee. So and I'm trying to do anything that I can to help my fellow Afghans.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. That's very important work. And I'm seeing a lot of different sort of job hubs come out based on sort of that shared experience. And I think that they've been quite successful. So I'm very interested to see how that comes along. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to share? Okay, cool. There will be more opportunities. So if it comes to you, please let me know. So that's a little bit about mission and vision. And again, the reason why it's so important that we come up with our mission and vision, or even our objectives, is so that we can tie everything that we do, all of the activities that we come up with, the projects that we create, we can tie them back to our overall mission and vision. And again, make sure that we are, one, communicating that mission and vision, but also actually reaching those goals. So I want to get into a little bit of the process that I use, the process that I know a few people use in terms of thinking about our strategic planning. So now that we have our mission and vision, and you might not have come up with that yet, totally fine. Once you do though, I want you to think about the future. So when you think about your project, your organization, and what it is that you're hoping to accomplish, I have 6 months to a year here for now, but you might want to think about 3 years or 5 years from now. Where do you want to be? So I put here, 6 months to a year. Imagine your funder is putting together highlights of the most successful projects they've supported. You've been selected to share your story. What are people saying about the work that you've done? What are people saying about the impact that you've had? Visioning our sort of successful futures allows us to think about all of the possibilities that could come our way as we're thinking about our future. So what is it that we want to accomplish? How do we want to feel? What are people saying about the work? What impact have we had? And so in 6 months, you might say, if you're working with youth or even if you're employing or getting folks hired, you might say, we have helped get 15 young people hired or new immigrants hired in the next 6 months. We have grown our Instagram following by 500. We are having conversations with members of parliament about supports that need to be in place for us to accomplish our vision. So where is it that you want to be down the line, 6 months, a year, 3 years, 5 years from now, and envision that future, so that way we can get into the next piece, which is then what needs to happen for you to achieve that goal. So if you want to get 15 youth hired in the next 6 months, what is that you need to do? Who do you need to connect with? What resources might you need? What skills, tools, or knowledge might you need to be able to get there? If you want to grow your following by 500 on Instagram, what steps do you need to take? So you might say, okay, well, first we need to start an Instagram account if you haven't done that already. Who do you need to connect with? Perhaps no one on your team currently has communications or marketing skills. So perhaps you need to get a volunteer or hire a communications coordinator. What material resources might you need? Maybe you need funding to be able to support sponsored ads to get that following to go up. Skills, tools, or knowledge. Maybe you need to invest in Hootsuite, or I don't know anything about communications, but maybe you need to invest in a tool that helps you be able to track your following or be able to post regularly. So thinking about the future allows us to work backwards from where we want to be in terms of seeing what it is that we need to get there. So no matter what that goal is, whether it's hiring 15 people, growing your Instagram following, meeting with MPs, if we have that vision in mind, then going backwards from there and coming up with those steps is going to be a whole lot easier. And so once you've come up with these goals, or these steps, I should say, we want to make them smart. And I think a lot of people talk about SMART goals, so I won't spend a ton of time here. But when we think about all of the things that we want to do, the steps that we need to take, we also want to make them SMART, which is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So with specific, I spoke a little bit about this before, what is it exactly that we're trying to achieve? So with the 500 followers, I'm saying 500 followers. That's specific. And I might say, okay, I want, where are we? We're in August. I want 500 additional followers by January of 2022. That is my goal. It's super specific, it's measurable, so I can tell if I've gotten to 500 very easily. If I only get to 450, or maybe I get to 650, who knows, but it is very measurable. It's attainable. I mean, I actually don't know if 500 followers is attainable. I'm not that well versed, like I said, but making sure that, you know, if you have a following of, I don't know, 3,000 already, then maybe an extra 500 is very attainable for you. But really thinking about, is it possible to achieve it? Am I setting a goal that is within reason and within our capacity? It has to be relevant. So really understanding why it is that we need those 500 followers. So it can't just be, oh, we arbitrarily want 500 followers. We have to think about, what does that 500 followers mean in terms of our overall mission and vision? So tying it back to that. So maybe 500 extra followers means that you're able to recruit more youth for your program, or more adults, or maybe that means that you're able to connect with more employers and to get your name out there. So making sure that it's relevant to the work that you're actually trying to accomplish, and time bound, like I said. So January 2022 is when I want to accomplish this by. Making your goals SMART, again, it means that you're able to track and evaluate how things are going. And that's what's going to make it sustainable. For you to be able to say, this is what we're trying to accomplish exactly. Here's where we got to. So even if you don't reach that 500 followers, by having a SMART goal and knowing what you were trying to achieve, you can then think back with yourself or with your team and say, why didn't we get to that 500? What needs to change for us to get to that goal? And really reflecting on that without sort of having a goal in mind and sort of saying, oh yeah, we want to gain more followers. what do we know? How do we know if we got there? So just making sure as you're starting to think about the future of your project and thinking about the sustainability of your project, that you're creating those SMART goals. I want to pause just in case anyone has questions, because I feel like I'm zooming through.
A great template for any aspect of your life, like SMART goals. Keeps you accountable.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Agreed. Yeah. And then sometimes you overshoot your goals, and then it's even more exciting. Because I think also a lot of times we don't take the time to sort of celebrate our wins, whether big or small. And so having SMART goals allows you to actually reflect and say, yeah, we hit that goal. And that's exciting and motivating and inspiring, both for yourself, your team members, maybe even volunteers. So being able to communicate clearly, especially to funders, they always want to know the numbers. So being able to say, yeah, our goal was 50 and we got 65 is going to be huge. And so the last piece of this that I want to get into sort of before opening up things for questions is this project canvas. And so when we're thinking about sustainability, we're often thinking about programs, structures, and budgeting, and networks, and partnership building, and all of these pieces, which are so important. And so the fundamentals of how we get there, how we know what partnerships we need to build, how we know how to budget and how much budget we need, being able to do our outreach, so who we need to speak to, how we need to connect with them, all comes from, again, understanding our mission and vision, and then also really understanding what it is that we're trying to achieve through SMART goals and hopefully through this project canvas. So the project canvas is something that I put together that helps sort of take us through all of those things to make sure that the activities and the projects that we have in mind, again, are aligned with that mission and vision. So starting at the top with your mission and vision, defining your problem. So what is the problem or issue you're addressing through your work? Being very, very clear on what it is that you're actually trying to address. And then what is your solution? So you might even think, okay, yes, I am trying to address the issue of underemployment for newcomer youth, as an example. What is your unique solution to that? So that might be creating a hiring hub, that might be doing skill development, that might be partnering with organizations that are hiring. So what is your actual solution? What are the actions that you are taking to solve the problem or issue? So making sure that it's specific to what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Who is impacted by your actions? So when we think about who's impacted by the actions, we can think about it in a couple of ways. One, directly, so our direct beneficiaries, but you also might want to think about who else is on the periphery or might be indirectly impacted. So I was working with youth in schools, primary and pre-primary grade youth. And we were doing education programs and art programming, but one of the things that we realized was that in terms of like mental health and doing mental health literacy, we could teach the young people a lot of different things about their own mental health and wellness. But then when they came to us, they would say, yeah, but I'm going home and my parents don't really understand these things. And so we realized as a project that also our indirect sort of stakeholders in that situation were also parents. So going through this process allowed us to think about who else might we need to either support or offer projects or funding or materials to, so that we are actually reaching our goal. So in this case, we started setting up parent information sessions. We did yoga sessions and wellness sessions with parents so that both parents and youth were actively involved. And then the youth felt more comfortable sort of engaging in our work, which was our main goal. But we realized that we had to do other things to make sure that we got there and that it was sustainable. And so that the youth that we were trying to impact were coming back and they were excited to come back. Needs. So what do the folks that you're working with need to feel like your work is successful? What barriers might exist for your key stakeholders? What do they need to benefit from your organization or programming? So thinking back to those youth as an example, perhaps we needed to provide bus fare and tokens so that they could actually get to the program. It might mean changing the space so that it's more accessible or more private so that they feel more comfortable. It might mean having peer supporters in their room. So what are the needs and what might the barriers be for your stakeholders in being able to actively participate in the program or the project that you're trying to offer? Because as much as we have ideas in mind around what we want our impact to be, oftentimes there are other barriers that are getting in the way to people actively participating. I was facilitating an entrepreneurship course at the beginning of this year. And one of the things that we realized, and I was managing an entrepreneurship course as well, is that folks were dropping out midway through and we couldn't figure out, we didn't really know what was going on. And it turned out, especially throughout COVID, that for our adult program, we were working mostly with like 45 and up. And so a lot of the adults actually just weren't comfortable with being online. So in that case, we had to say, okay, what's the barrier here? The barrier here is the tech component of our program. And so I had to go back and say, what can we do about this? So it meant building partnerships with tech organizations who can offer laptops to the adults so that they weren't connecting on their phone and that would be easier for them to connect. It also meant adding additional hours to the program coordinator role so that they could help our participants out with the technology, setting up one-on-ones to go through all the functions on Zoom. And then it also meant creating a tech workshop. So we went through all of the different components of the technology that we were going to use in the program at the very, very beginning of the session. So that way, when we got to the middle and things were getting a little bit hectic, our participants already had the skills and knowledge so that they could finish the program. So when we're thinking about needs and longevity and sustainability, we have to think holistically about how our program is going to run and make sure that we're addressing those pieces. SMART goals we talked about. So now that you know what the needs are, you know what your solution is, you know who you're trying to impact, what are the actual goals? So for my entrepreneurship program, it was graduating 20 adults and having them 50% of them start their business. So that was the overall goal. And then what do you need to reach those goals? So that's where we get into some of the nitty gritty around budgeting. What resources do we need? What people do we need to connect with? So really going through, okay, now that we know what those goals are, what are we going to need? In this case, again, it was creating that partnership with a tech organization that could offer laptops to our participants. We needed, obviously, additional funding to offer more tech support opportunities. So adding those additional hours to my program coordinator's role. Really thinking about, okay, now that we know what those goals are, what resources do we need? And then I also think that it's really important as you're thinking about what it is you need to evaluate your existing tools and resources. So what do you already have within yourself, within your team that you can utilize to reach some of those goals? So perhaps you already know someone at the tech organization. Perhaps you have a friend that does graphic design that can help you design your website or your magazine. Maybe you created a partnership with an organization that has access to funding that might be able to support you. So what do we already have? And then from there, figuring out what else it is that we need to be successful. So that's a lot. But I do think that building these fundamentals and really understanding in the long term what it is that you're going to need is the first step in that strategic planning process. And you can get into the details of what that looks like later on. But if you're already foreseeing some of the barriers, some of the challenges, what resources you're going to need now, then you can plan ahead for those things. And then when you get to it, it doesn't seem so overwhelming or daunting because you're like, I expected this to happen and I'm already prepared with whatever it is that we need to be able to move this program or project forward or organization forward. Any questions about the project canvas?
So how early on in your project, like ideation process, do you think you should do the project canvas? Is it when it's like super rough, or is it when you have developed your ideas more?
Yeah, the project canvas is an evolving sort of iterative process. So I would say as soon as you come up with your idea, start sketching out the basics of what you know, and then continue to work on it throughout the project if it feels relevant still. So when you first start, you might not have all the SMART goals. You might have a few general ones. Go back to it. You also might say, okay, now, as you're going through it, you've identified your key stakeholders and their needs. You actually might have to go back to your solution and say, okay, now that we understand these needs, we need to go back to the solution and the actions and change that up a bit to make sure that it's matching those needs. So it's something that you can sort of work on as you go and will be ever evolving and ever changing until you sort of launch your project.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I have another question that I can ask later on, maybe because it was related more so to funding, like for like in the future, if you want a more sustainable project for multiple years. I know that a lot of funding opportunities, they emphasize like, oh, we want a project or program idea that will, you know, that is like over 2 or 3 year timeline. So how do we sketch or map out for that? Like, what, like, I know you're a consultant as well, which is fantastic. So I know you have lots of experience. What distinguishes like a good, you know, sustainable project from something that like, you know, will get rejected for funding? What do people want to see usually?
Yeah, that's an important question. And so the first thing that I always say, and especially when it comes to sort of that like multi-year large scale funding, if you can find opportunities to access maybe less funding, but design a pilot project that's able to sort of showcase the impact of your work, it makes it a lot easier to say, okay, we've already done this and we reached 10 youth in the time that we had with, you know, X amount of dollars, or with, you know, only 2 team members, whatever the case may be. But it sort of gives you this opportunity to say, we already know this idea is successful or can be successful and that it can have this large scale impact. Now all we need is more money to be able to actually scale that. So if you have opportunities to sort of run like a pilot project that's smaller in scale, I would say take that, because that's your proof of concept. When you go to a funder, and funders want to know that if they're handing you over funding, that you're actually going to accomplish those goals. So being able to say, we already ran a project like this, is the first step, I would say, where possible. But also, again, like going back to this project canvas, really mapping out what it is that you're going to accomplish. And what funders also want to be able to see is that in year one doesn't necessarily look the same as year 3. So by year 3, they're going to want to see higher numbers, larger impact. So being able to communicate how you're going to get there, how you're going to get from 10 youth to 50 youth by year 3 is going to be really helpful. So thinking about this and like those barriers and what outreach you need to do, having all of those things already mapped out for yourselves is going to convince a funder like, okay, yeah, they've thought about what this is going to look like and how they're going to get there. And communicating that is key.
Wonderful. Great. Well, thanks for that inside scoop. And I definitely can understand that, like, they want to see something, they want to see some impact, and a pilot project would be super helpful for that.
Yeah.
Perfect.
You might also, want to find a trustee where possible.
Yes.
So there are organizations that will trustee you. So that way they're taking on some of that liability. But again, you get that opportunity to prove the concept, prove that impact, and then sort of renegotiate later on.
Perfect.
I've got 5 minutes left, so I wanted to leave some room for questions. Any other questions? Anything that I didn't cover, didn't talk about, but you were hoping to get from this workshop today?
Yes, the floor is yours, everyone. I know some people shared their project ideas earlier and they sound super exciting. So it's the time to share if you have any questions about your mission, your vision, anything sustainable related as well.
Literally anything. Yeah. Might not have the answer, but I might know how to get it if I don't have it.
Maybe even like a glimpse of everyone's project idea, because I know I've seen familiar names. I know Ramiz, Manzoura, you all, and Frishta Hazara as well. You all had projects last year. I don't know if you are willing to share that, just like a little snippet into your projects. I think it'd be helpful for other people to know as well.
So our plan for our projects this year, or what we had done, I guess, last year?
This year, or if you want to share about last year and your successes too, I feel like other people would benefit. But maybe this year, maybe Jay can provide some insight into it.
Yeah, this year we were thinking of focusing. So our main platform, we like to provide like educational content or something like that. So we try to maybe networking opportunities, professional like platforms, stuff like that. And last year we did financial literacy. So this year we kind of want to focus on healthcare, particularly with the pandemic. So what we're looking into is trying to get the different career pathways that people can take within healthcare. So like what can you do with like, I don't know, a doctor, the basics, but also stuff that are like a little less well-known, like research. So that's kind of like what we're looking into. It's a preliminary idea. So we're still thinking about it, but that's the focus we want this year.
Awesome. That sounds very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, Ramiz, feel free to go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My internet is very unreliable. So if you can, I'll just, so the whole project is very personal to me because I came to Canada myself as a refugee. And what I do under the whole project is that I try to advocate and assist refugees and newcomers, mainly Afghan young refugees, to build a social capital, to understand the culture more, to keep for future here in Canada. Because when you come as a refugee, you leave your country, your home, your friends, your community, your network, your influence, and that is huge. So basically you take a journey into the unknown and you enter an unexplored, unknown territory. It is like in a state of chaos, and that can be very, very difficult. That's why a lot of people lose their hope. They don't continue with what their life goal has been, like what their mission has been, and they just give up on their dreams, jobs for survival, their life, because they have to do that. And it's really, really difficult for newcomers and refugees to basically build that influence. You know, if you don't, if you into a community where your social influence is difficult to do mobilization, to get people to listen to you and to like do a collective work. And it can be very difficult on who are social activists who exercise leadership, you know, in communities where they have social to mobilize to continue the work. So these are like the things that I learned, and I'm now trying to share that with other young refugees and newcomers. Our first round was a socializing event. We brought a small group of Afghan young refugees and newcomers. We also had like 2 successful Afghan refugees who shared their story of their journey. I think storytelling is also extremely or someone
Yeah.
Me.
Yeah, Ramiz.
their community, mainly people who are like extroverted. I'm sorry. Is it better now, or I think I will stop?
Now it's better. Now it's better. But before that, it was like fully robotic. But I caught a lot of stuff. I hope you did, Jay, too.
I got up to the storytelling piece, and I
Yes.
say that I absolutely agree. Storytelling is such a powerful tool for building connection, building relationships, and creating, like almost advocating and creating change just through sort of our own lived experiences. So I love that that's such a highlight for your project. And I'm so sorry I missed the end of that, but I think maybe we can hear you.
So yeah, with the storytelling part, we had 2 successful Afghan refugees. They shared their story that had a huge impact on the participants to listen to their story and use their experience to, you know, in order to move on. And then we also try to connect these people with those successful Afghan refugees who now have integrated and know more. And I also try to do targeted engagement work with individuals who ask for support, and talk to them and tell them about the culture and community more, how they can find their way, and just understand that it's not the end of their story. Some people think that when they come to another country as refugees, when they see these big walls in front of them, they think that this is the end of their story, which is not. And I've been trying to tell my friends in the community and even myself that this is not the end of the story. There's a lot that we can do here. It's just difficult, but we need to understand the difficulties and move on. So for the next round, what I'm planning is a refugee mental health week. I work with refugees and not under the whole project alone, but I'm
We're losing you again. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Maybe you can also try typing in the chat, Ramiz. But a lot of what you said, we definitely caught that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's about Refugee Mental Health Week.
Yes.
So what I'm planning to do is to organize a 1-week campaign for Refugee Mental Health Week. And because it's important, I would like, and the purpose I'm doing this is because in the long term, I would like to convince the government and IRCC to have a special program for that. Refugees are suffering a lot of mental health issues, and unfortunately, they don't know where to go. They don't know how to access mental health support. So this is going to this is what I'm planning to do, to bring on board experts and connect some mental health experts with refugees that need support, but also connect them with people who are hopeful. You know, you don't need to be a mental health expert in order to provide friendly therapy. Of course, you can't do the advice what specifically to do, but most of the time sharing this personal experience and learnings with other people can be a big help. So that's what I'm planning to do. I'm still working on the details of the 1 week campaign, but that's what I'm planning to do. I myself, as a refugee, experienced a lot of like, not a lot, but some mental health issues, you know, and it's okay to talk about it and say it, and it's true, we're human. And I know a lot of other people suffering it, that I try to help them, you know, and I would like to draw attention to that, draw attention to how important that is, and how critical in a critical situation is this issue, because there are not a lot of support provided. I've been struggling to find some mental health support or therapy for one of my friends, and still we haven't found anything. Sometimes I just give him a call and we talk about what's going on, you know, just try to connect. But that's the purpose of the second round of the project.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I agree that mental health seems to be this very, very overlooked piece of the puzzle. So I'm really happy to hear that that's a focus for you. I think they say Canada would need to spend like 30% of its budget on mental health for us to actually reach positive mental health outcomes, and we're at about 6% right now. So a big, huge disparity there. So yeah, if you can start filling some of those gaps, I think that that's an incredible cause.
Yeah, what a wonderful project idea. And I know, Ramez, you did have a project last year, and some people I know attended and they've benefited a lot from it. And my family came here as refugees as well, so I cannot agree more. I feel like what you're touching on, because I do work in like the social service field and mental health and all of that, peer support work is just as important, right? You do need the counseling with and the therapy and psychiatry, but especially in the Afghan community, I feel like a lot of people cannot just come as refugees and then take that step to, you know, go to a psychiatrist right away. It's a big jump and there's already a big stigma. And I feel like that peer support work that I feel like you're touching on is going to be that stepping stone. And I know as a kid, as a 7-year-old, if I had someone my own age who was Afghan, who knew the language, but was there to support me or talk to me, and someone for my mom's age, you know, in different ages, different age groups and everything, that would have been so incredibly helpful. So I feel like your project can have such a great impact, and I hope that it, you know, can be scaled up, because this is not just like a one-time thing. It's definitely a big issue that needs to be addressed. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for Jay, your incredible insights and valuable insights, and taking the time for being here on a Saturday. And I know we went a little over time, but I feel like the discussions and the information was just great. So thank you so much for that. And yeah, Jay, I know you left your email and the presentation slides. Thank you for making yourself accessible and your information, especially for youth who usually don't have access to that. I will stop the recording.